West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee will hold an emergency meeting today to discuss whether and how use of Johnson & Johnson's coronavirus vaccine should continue in the United States. This after 6 women out of the nearly 7 million Americans who've received the shot reported a rare and severe type of blood clot. Joining me now is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He is President Biden's chief medical advisor on the pandemic. Dr. Fauci, as always, great to have you here. 6 cases out of 7 million doses. That is literally less than 1 in a million. Why is that enough to justify a pause?
Well, what the CDC and the FDA wanted to do is they were accumulating a recognition of the cases. First 1, 2, then 3. When they got to 6, they decided, let's just pause. Very likely quite temporary, but just pause to take a good look at this and maybe get some more details and see if, in fact, that there are others, perhaps many others. And then we'll find out what we're going to do and then move on from there. So one was a caution from regard to the safety itself. But there's also another issue involved. If there are women out there who have been vaccinated and who get this syndrome, this very serious syndrome, rare albeit, if they did, we wanted to make the doctors out there who know about this to make sure they treat the person correctly, because the standard way, John, that you treat clots is by an anticoagulant called heparin. Heparin is contraindicated in this situation and might make matters worse. So there's a twofold reason. One, for an abundance of caution of safety, take a quick look, get more details, but also a heads up to the physicians out there that if you see these kinds of cases, don't treat them with heparin. There are other modalities of treatment that can be used.
You said to look and see if there are more, maybe many more cases. Do you have any reason to believe that there are many more cases?
No, John, I don't. I'm just saying that's one of the reasons, because when you put a pause, you want to look around and say, maybe there are others that have been reported and we don't know about it. So let's take a quick look, get everybody to get a heads up and alert to it, and then see if there are any other cases.
Let me read you what Governor Chris Sununu of New Hampshire said. He was one of the governors on this call getting the explanation yesterday morning. He said, it's very hard as governors to go out and explain that we're pausing based on something that is, as according to Dr. Fauci, a 1 in a million occurrence. What has to be appreciated is the ability for governors to reinstill confidence after something like this is 100 times harder than the pause is in the first place. Your reaction?
John, you can take that on the other side of that coin, because I know when I go out there and talk to people about hesitancy, the overwhelming reason for that is a concern about safety. So if there is a concern about a hesitancy out there, the fact that this was done would, in my mind, underscore and confirm how seriously we take safety. even though it's a very rare event. So if anybody's got a doubt that, they may not be taking safety very seriously, I think this is an affirmation that safety is a primary consideration when it comes to the FDA and the CDC. That's why it was done, and that's why it's a pause. It isn't a cancellation, it's a pause.
Days, weeks, months?
Speaking to the CDC and the FDA, it is very likely going to be more days to weeks than weeks to months. I doubt very seriously if we're talking about weeks to months.
You know that there is this issue of vaccine hesitancy out there, broadly speaking, not just about Johnson & Johnson, but about vaccines in general. One of the reasons is some of the things people say. And last night, I want to read you, I don't want to play it because I'm not sure that helps the cause here of saving lives, something that TV personality Tucker Carlson said on TV about vaccines in general. He said, if vaccines are effective, there's no reason for people who have received the vaccine to wear masks or avoid physical contact. So maybe it doesn't work. And they're simply not telling you that. Let me repeat that again. So maybe it doesn't work, and they're simply not telling you that. What do you have to say to Tucker Carlson?
Yeah. That's just a typical crazy conspiracy theory. Why would we not tell people if it doesn't work? Look at the data. The data are overwhelming. In the 3 vaccines that have been approved for use in an emergency use authorization, the J&J, the Pfizer, and the Moderna, you had 30,000, 44,000, and 40,000 people in a clinical trial with an overwhelming signal of efficacy. So I don't have any idea what he's talking about.
How dangerous is it for a TV personality like that who does have an audience of millions to speculate about something like that?
Well, it's certainly not helpful to the public health of this nation or even globally. I don't want to get into arguments about Tucker Carlson, but to me, it's just, it's counter to what we were trying to accomplish to protect the safety and the health of the American public.
One of the things, there's different levels of vaccine hesitancy, right? There are anti-vaxxers. And then there are one attitude some people have is a wait-and-see approach. I want to wait and see what happens as more and more people get the vaccine. What's your message overall, and generally speaking, to the wait-and-see people with the vaccine?
Man, it's understandable why people do that. I mean, you don't want to be pejorative against them. I mean, that's a natural instinct of wanting to wait and see. But what you tell people, let's look at the data, okay? What we have right now, we have over 120, close to 130 million people have already received at least one dose of this. I mean, that's a lot of people. I mean, how long do you want to wait and see? I mean, you have almost half the country has received at least one dose. So I think we've had enough wait and see. Let's do it.
3.4 million people a day on average now, which is a remarkable number, an astounding number, which should be celebrated. Just one last question, just on some of the data we're seeing, and this is an idea that Dr. Sanjay put in my ear. We are seeing cases rise now, nearly 80,000 cases a day now, which I know you think is a number that's way too high. Hospitalizations are rising a little bit, but flat to up a little bit, but deaths continue to fall in the United States. And one of the things that Sanjay said is, one of the things we don't know, is it possible that, yes, cases may still rise a little bit, hospitalizations even too, but the number of deaths will continue to drop because the most vulnerable population has been vaccinated. Is it possible we will continue to see a drop in deaths no matter what happens with cases?
Yeah, I think, as usual, Sanjay's right on the money. I think that's exactly what's going to happen because, if you look at the people who are most vulnerable to death, namely the elderly, we know that from experience now over greater than a year. There's more than 76% of people over 65 who have been vaccinated. So, there you have it. The most vulnerable, to the extent of the relative proportion, are protected. So even though you're seeing people infected, because there's, as you know, a race, as I've said so many times, John, a race between getting as many people vaccinated as possible with the virus itself surging or trying to surge. It's creeping up around 80,000. That's a very high number, 80,000 per day. As we get more and more people, that 3 to 4 million people per day vaccinated, the vaccine component of this race is going to get stronger and stronger, and then you're going to start to see the cases come down.
It is Wednesday, the 14th of April of 2021. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Well, the Eggs Benedict with the lovely hollandaise, so velvety, is available in the virtual existence that we exist virtually right now. So have at it. All right. Lots of news in the news. Of course, we have another, well, shall we say, some strife in the streets in Minnesota, the land of lakes. And why? Keep murdering black people and then kind of lying about it is not a good thing. Granted, I suppose one could say, well, the kid shouldn't have, pulled away from the cop, but we're talking about tags on a new car. We're talking about an air freshener hanging from the mirror. We're talking about any number of things. But the most important, I suppose, is that a 26-year veteran either did not know how to handle her service weapon or had some sort of implicit bias against black men, especially very skinny black men, because you never know when they're going to hulk up. Is that what it is? So, as I mentioned before, yesterday's show, I believe I mentioned this, is that her own body camera showed her holding her service weapon the whole time. She never pulled out a taser. She never holstered her gun. So she did resign, and I think that was probably the prudent thing to do. She wants to get her pension. And, one might say, just one mistake. After 26 years, except it wasn't one mistake. Apparently, she's been involved in some cover-ups of the shooting of other young black men during her 26-year tenure. Oh, yeah, cop union president, too. She, I don't know if she still is. Maybe it's former. But you have to be, apparently, a particular type to be a cop union president. Yeah, and you know what type I'm talking about. The kind that makes Jimmy Hoffa pretty much a choir boy. Which he was, literally. When he was younger. Okay, when he was younger. I don't think he was singing to the choir when they drove him away that one day, never to be seen again. So, there's that going on, and looks like they've mobilized the military to protect this tiny little police department that apparently has a long history of pretty much terrorizing the black community for a while. In fact, just as a reminder, if I mentioned yesterday about this particular township, is it a township or a town? Anyway, it was founded by a racist cop. Isn't that nice? Yeah, an actual KKK fellow. I believe he was a Grand Dragon. The Grand Wizard would have been Nathan Bedford Forrest, of course. And what is the KKK? They were a bunch of Southern militia types who wanted to make sure that, and this is after the Civil War, by the way, wanted to make sure that, the civil society was particularly white in the former bastion of the Confederate States. And they wanted to make sure Reconstruction didn't work. And how to make Reconstruction not work? Well, terrorize the black population. And how do you do that? Well, with some hooded, masked vigilantes. And some people might call them terrorists. And that's what they were and are to this day. So you could just say Brooklyn Center is just fulfilling the aspirations of how its founder originally intended. The guy that shot Jacob Blake in Wisconsin is getting off because he was just following department policy, and that's to shoot a kid in the back 7 times. That's department policy. I guess that trumps any other kind of law, constitutional, human, or otherwise. Wow. Department policy. You know, I worked in the furniture department in a few department stores. Are you saying that the department policy of the department I was in would have superseded anything I did out on the street? Really? Okay, I know it's apples and oranges, but I like doing apples and oranges. Okay? It's a nice little contrast. A little acidic, a little sweet, you know. Anyway, so much news, but not as maddening as the previous 4 years. Isn't that nice? Indeed. So everybody's going up in arms over the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because there's an incidence of 6 people who got some sort of side effect. Blood clots. I don't know, you know, every nervous jumpy leg syndrome medicine out there, one of the side effects is you could get blood clots. Now, I know this is a particular kind of blood clot that's actually quite scary, but I don't know. I just don't understand how the conservative reactionary Nazi mind works. First, they're all upset because, you know, why should 500,000 people dead prevent me from going out and making sure that more people might die because of my inability to be a good neighbor and wear a mask, you know? And now they say, oh, look, 6 incidences of blood clots. We got to stop all these vaccines. My God. 500 dead, not enough to get them to wear a mask. 6 getting blood clots, and that's enough for them to say, yeah, got to get rid of the whole program. All right, well, obviously, they just look for straws to pull, and that's all they do. And why would we ever want to negotiate with terrorists is beyond me. It really is. I keep reading these articles now that are pretty much being buried in the back pages, so to speak, and that is, we'll never know what happened on January 6th because we just can't seem to get a January 6th commission up off the ground. Well, I don't know. How about asking The Hague and Interpol to help? You want an independent commission? That's where I would go. Just let them find out. You know, they don't have to have any force of law. We can take care of that after we know what the hell happened. We suspect what happened. But in a court of law, you have to prove it. And what better way? I don't want a bipartisan commission with Nazis. Nobody negotiated with the Nazis about whether they would have a Nuremberg tribunal. Come on. Jesus. But that's where we are. Because apparently, after all these years of naming military bases and all sorts of American iconography after Confederate traitors, they think now the Nazis can just tell us what to do. This is America, pal. We already kicked Nazi ass. We'll do it again. And one way to do it is to make sure the Nazis are purged from every level of law enforcement, the military, and then we'll go throughout government. And I don't know, maybe some types out there in the real world, whatever the real world is. There's no room for Nazis in America. I am sorry. I'm tired of it. I know. I was trying to make the joke like there's no Nazis in baseball. And then the retort would be, but what about Ty Cobb? Then I just, well, you know what? Actually, yeah, baseball is not exempt either. We got to purge the Nazis out of every aspect of American existence. It is a caustic element, and like I said, no room for it. Not in a representative democracy. No. Well, enough of that sermonizing, and you know how I will sermonize if given the opportunity. In fact, this whole hour is an opportunity. What am I thinking? Well, let's get back to the curated part, because, you know, the German part of me does demand order. Demand? What? Oh, my God. Well, at the top, of course, that was Dr. Anthony Fauci responding to Tucker Carlson's insistence that the COVID-19 vaccines just don't work. God. Between replacement theories and anti-vax theories, what is up with Tucker Carlson being given a platform to be a Nazi? All right. First Amendment rights, my ass. Okay. He actually, when he goes to court, his defense is that no one believes what I say. I'm a comedian. Yeah, right. Real funny, pal. On the rest of the menu, the Senate will test its filibuster agreement that they made. The Repugs and the Dems made an agreement about, well, let's at least get things to go to debate. Well, they're going to test that today over an Asian American hate crime bill. And I can tell you right now who I think has probably already broken the filibuster agreement, and it doesn't start with D's. The New York City police unions dropped their challenge to the public release of officer disciplinary records, and that's actually a big story. And an Atlanta public high school will remove the name of KKK Grand Wizard Nathan Bedford Forrest and rename it after baseball legend Hank Aaron. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, right there by the social media scroll, is the chat room link. And the chat room, by the way, is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And Kelly, you should know, is doing so much more and is quite a busy gal. In fact, look for Kelly, and I'll give some links on social media just to help you along. She's got a book, and if you could buy her book, that would be a good thing, and I'll get the actual information to give to you by way of, this live broadcast and podcast later on. But do look for Kelly online, Kelly Lincoln, and she's got a book out, and buy her book. All right, thank you, Kelly. If you would then look across the page at the bottom of our homepage, at netrootsradio.com, you hopefully will then notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, as some others have, and if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink that you could send those funds to us once a month, that would help us pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue broadcasting as we have for the last 10 years. Happy birthday to us. It is our 10th year anniversary this year of 24/7, 365 continuous broadcasting. Who does that? And on a shoestring too. And the shoestring has been sustained because of your generosity, and thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty, because we take it seriously. We really do. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and that's the N before the M, Putnam. All right, we're the higher class of putts. The Putmans ostensibly are the more crude putts, but the Putnams, yeah, we're ostensibly a little bit more refined. Yeah, a little bit. Anyway, follow me at Justice Putnam on Twitter. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes, and you could pick it up there too. And that's done about 10 minutes before showtime. The show notes and links are an integral part to this multimedia operation because, well, that's where the actual reportage is. Check it out. And so, yeah, follow me there on Twitter at Justice Putnam for those show notes and links and other, I don't know, pithy types of statements and whatnot. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And most importantly in this whole spiel, would you please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, well, we've got a filibuster test in the Senate today, and Lisa Mascaro and Mary Clark Jalonik of the Associated Press report on this test of the filibuster. The Senate is poised to start debate on legislation confronting the rise of potential hate crimes against Asian Americans, not the ones that already happened, apparently. A growing problem during the coronavirus crisis that will also test whether the chamber can push past partisanship on an issue important to many constituents. Well, I would say to many constituents, just not the Nazis. The Nazis would love to see all this racial strife. In fact, isn't that their whole reason to tet? You would think. Typically, the Democratic-sponsored COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act might quickly face a filibuster, opposed by Republicans who prefer a different approach. You know, like naming the COVID-19 pandemic the Chinese flu. And, but under the Senate leaders' agreement struck at the start of the year, Republicans and Democrats pledged to at least try to debate bills to see if they could reach agreement through the legislative process. Ahead of today's initial vote, several leaders of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community in Congress gave personal and heart-wrenching stories of the racism they and their constituents have faced. Incidents on the rise during the coronavirus outbreak. For more than a year, the Asian community has been fighting two crises, the COVID-19 pandemic and the anti-Asian hate. Representative Grace Meng, a Democrat from New York and co-author of the bill, said yesterday, Tuesday, at the Capitol. Meng described well-documented but horrifying images of people being shoved and beaten in public attacks, and of her own conversations with survivors, including the families of the victims of the deadly shootings last month in Atlanta. 6 of those killed were women of Asian descent. Combating hate should not be a partisan issue. It's about the safety of all Americans, Meng said. The bill is the most substantive congressional response to what has been an alarming rise in racist sentiment against Asian Americans, fueled in part by derogatory language about the virus's origins in China. Donald Trump, while president, played into that narrative with derisive nicknames for the virus. The moment harks back to earlier eras of racism against Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, and others of Asian heritage in this country. A robust floor debate is rare for the Senate, which has ground to a halt due to pervasive partisanship. Moscow, Mitch McConnell, the grim reaper of the graveyard where democracy goes to die? You mean that kind of partisanship? The gridlock has intensified calls for Democrats to change the filibuster rules to push past the opposition. Shy of taking that step, Schumer and McConnell had reached a tentative accord earlier this year to try to push past stalemates and allow senators to discuss and amend bills. Several Republican senators indicated they would prefer to adjust the hate crimes legislation, but they are reluctant to exercise the filibuster on this bill. Opposing it could expose senators to claims they are being racially insensitive. staff at the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. New York City Police, Fire, and Correction unions yesterday, Tuesday, dropped their challenge to the public release of disciplinary records. The request to dismiss the litigation was praised by Communities United for Police Reform, which in a release called on Mayor Bill de Blasio and the New York City Police Department to expand the release of police misconduct and discipline records. This is a big win against police unions' baseless fear-mongering, definitively closing the door on their attempt to use the courts to overturn the will of New Yorkers after last summer's repeal of New York's infamous police secrecy law, said Zhu Hong Kong, the group's director. Or maybe that's King. The city put up some records last month after a federal appeals court in February approved the release of disciplinary records, while public safety unions sued to block the city from posting them online. New York City's law office and lawyers for unions and the city did not immediately respond to requests for comment because that is standard operating procedure. The union sued after state lawmakers last June reversed a law that kept disciplinary records secret for decades. Unions had opposed a new transparency law on grounds that it would unfairly taint the reputations of police officers, endangering them and affecting their future employment. Well, part of that is, good things, I would think, not endangering them. I don't know of any carpenters' unions that wield this kind of power. Do you? I really don't. The city's police watchdog agency, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, has posted a database of complaints it's received about officers, but the NYPD has been criticized for limiting its disclosures to matters that resulted in a guilty finding by the police commissioner, meaning most misconduct and disciplinary records remained offline. NYPD officials have said the public database would only include cases resulting in a finding or plea of guilty involving active officers dating initially to 2014. Anonymous staff at Reuters bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A public school in Atlanta, Georgia, which carried the name of a Confederate general, will be named after Hank Aaron, honoring the legendary baseball player who battled racism in the process of breaking the record for most home runs in a career. The Atlanta Board of Education unanimously voted to approve removing the name of Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest from Forest Hill Academy and renaming it the Hank Aaron New Beginnings Academy. Names do matter, Jason F. Estevez, Atlanta School Board Chairman, said at a meeting. School board members said Forrest's legacy was at odds with the community and its values. Well, you would think, since Nathan Bedford Forrest was the original KKK Grand Wizard. Was he an alchemist? Oh, boy. The renaming of the school, which will take effect this year, comes as monuments, memorials, and public spaces with links to slavery and racism have come under scrutiny, especially after killing of George Floyd last year while in police custody in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way of putting it. I think he was choked off to death by a knee to the throat for the whole world to see. Talk about a monument to racism. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, let's talk about Zack, baby. To talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League, it's best just to talk about Zack Snyder, the filmmaker, because at 4 hours and 2 minutes, we have his largest canvas to date on which to see him work his mojo. So without joining his haters or his defenders, let's just step back and look at his style and talk about its effects. Zack Snyder does not hide his director's hand. He overtly uses a number of filmmaking techniques, like disruptive focus adjustments, muted colors, monochromatic palettes, and most notably slow motion. So what's he about here? Well, unlike me, Snyder is not about speed. He does not want to rush you along, which makes him an interesting choice for directing action films. Just sitting with these images that he so carefully constructs can feel like waiting for engines to kick in, but digging a Snyder film means surrendering over to his sense of time. Even in his non-affected scenes, like when Batman finds Aquaman, there's a sense of threat and foreboding, but not of urgency. And I think the slow motion thing is just about visuals. We slow down on the Flash's run not because it's important for Flash to be in the moment, but because it's important to Snyder for us to see Flash in this moment. Snyder rarely uses slow motion to provide insight into character, because character is another thing he is not into. He has characters who face a struggle, usually having to escape from something or defend against something. In doing so, they employ technically impressive savagery, which usually allows them to succeed, although not in a pretty way, their moral shadiness echoed by Snyder's chromatic shading, which again makes him a surprising choice to adapt a collection of our biggest, goodest heroes. Anyway, that's it. Snyder doesn't give much character development. Clark, Bruce, Diana, Arthur, Barry, they're all pretty much the same people at the end of Justice League as they were at the beginning. But their final battle is really well plotted. So, is Zack Snyder's Justice League worth its hype? 4 hours will tell you. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science podcast. I'm Clara Moskowitz. There are probably many more particles out there in the universe than the ones we know about. And today, physicists got a hint about where they might be hiding. The finding comes from an experiment at Fermilab called muon G-2, which looks at particles called muons that are heavier cousins of electrons. It turns out their spins wobble more than the standard laws of physics say they should. Here to tell us all about it is David Herzog of the University of Washington, one of the physicists on the experiment. By the way, this segment is on the longer side, dear listener, but hey, this is complicated physics. David, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Claire. This is a really exciting time for us.
Okay, let's get grounded. Why are muons important?
Well, since the discovery of the muon, it's played actually a rather unique and versatile role in subatomic physics. The topics that people use muons for range from fundamental constants of nature, basic symmetries, weak nucleon and nuclear interactions. And for us, what we care about the most is standard model tests and searches for new physics. That's what we're going to do with them. Now, the muon is an unstable particle. It only lives for about 2 microseconds. But that's sufficiently long to precisely study its properties, and yet it's actually sufficiently short so that we have enough decays that we can also study. A lot of tremendous information are in the decay processes. Now, by a quirk of nature, which we call parity non-conservation or space non-conservation, muons are born what we call fully polarized, meaning they have spins in a direction that we go, like tops do. And when they decay, we say they are self-analyzing, which means we can figure out which way they were spinning when they decayed. And these two attributes are essential for the experiment that I'm going to talk to you about.
So tell us why you ran this experiment in the first place. Why look at muon's spin?
Well, when we measure the rate that the muon spin wobbles, or I use the word precesses in a magnetic field, we learn directly about its own magnetism, which we call the magnetic moment. But you might ask, what do we care about that for? Well, the laws of physics actually predict this magnetism very, very precisely. And the laws, if we think we know them completely, in turn tell us the rate of that wobbling that we should expect in the magnet. So by measuring the rate, we can learn if the laws of physics are missing anything.
Now tell us about the setup of this experiment. In basic terms, how did it work?
It is a very, very complicated setup, Clara, but let me just try to break it down simply. We shoot big batches of muons into a large 14-meter diameter superconducting magnet. All of them we shoot in with their spins kind of lined up in the direction they're going, like headlights on a car. Now, when the muons begin to circulate and run around the magnetic ring, they sort of act like race cars going around a circular track. So as they go round and around and around, it turns out that the direction that their spins point no longer stays kind of lined up with the way they were when they were injected. And every 29 times around the track, the spin direction actually makes an extra full turn. So this difference is what we measure. We measure the difference between the spin direction and the direction the muons were going. That signal then is all tied up in the comment I made about parity violation earlier in self-analyzing spin, I said. We record the products of the muon decays when they spin around like that, and we collect them into a spectrum that ends up with a kind of a modulation exactly at that lapping frequency. So the lapping frequency is the ticket, how fast the spin goes around faster than the muon runs around.
And what did you find?
Well, we found that wobble frequency was faster than the prediction. And we found also, interestingly enough, that the same kind of level faster than what had been measured 20 years ago at Brookhaven National Lab. So we confirmed this value that was out there for about 20 years that people were kind of like, is that right?
So what does this mean? And why is it so exciting?
Well, it's truly exciting because the significance of the difference now between the prediction and the experiments is so high that it looks like it might be revealing something. 20 years ago, there was just a soft difference between the prediction, but we have a higher precision experiment now. And when we combine that with the measurement from 20 years ago, the precision is pretty high. And we're really at the level where people begin to think this starts to look a bit like a discovery. So at the very beginning, Claire, what you said was perhaps there are more particles in the universe than the ones we know about. And it's those extra particles which would cause this spin to go faster than the prediction. It is such a complicated experiment. We're publishing 4 papers at once, probably 100 pages in the journals to explain the whole thing. I mean, I've been doing this for about 30 years, so... You also realize we do this blinded, right?
Right. So when did you find out?
Just about a month ago. So, just enough to put in the numbers into the final plots and to write the beginning and ends of the paper. 90% of the paper is written before we know the result. And basically, you have 170 people sitting on a Zoom meeting that all have to be satisfied and vote. And then we reveal these secret envelopes, and then we decode the clock frequency, and suddenly we see the result. It's really unnerving, but it absolutely means we're not biased as to what we're going to get, because we have no way to change the number after we type in the secret code.
And what did you feel when you saw that number?
To be honest, we all screamed in excitement, but maybe for different reasons. For me, having been involved in this so long ago and also being involved in the previous experiment, I was extremely happy that we were verifying that the previous experiment was correct. But then the second emotion comes along that the two of them together now push the difference to what's actually called 4.2 standard deviations, which means it's about a 1 in 40,000 chance or so of being a fluke. And that really is exciting because we're all looking for new physics.
That's amazing. So we might actually be seeing the work of particles that we never knew about before.
It sure does, but we do have more work to go. We're just sitting on the smallest pile of the data so far in terms of the results. We have a lot more data that we're taking as we speak, and only then, when we analyze all of it, might we actually know the final truth to this. But the other thing that this makes it kind of interesting is from all of the students and postdocs and young people still working on this with so much more data to go, basically, we're not quite over the line of what they call discovery at 5 standard deviations. So this is very motivating for us to finish the job since we have so much more data that we can look at. All of it sort of fell in the right place to keep it kind of cool.
Well, then, I'm going to stay tuned. Thank you so much, David.
You bet. It was enjoyable.
For Scientific American's 60-Second Science podcast, I'm Clara Moskowitz.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Could giving food or water to a 92-year-old standing in a line for hours under the hot sun waiting to vote be a crime? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And yes, in Georgia, offering food or water to anyone on a line to vote is a crime, thanks to a new just-passed 95-page voter suppression law, which establishes new rigid voter identification requirements for absentee ballots, a requirement that will prevent many people who need to vote absentee or by mail from voting at all, and will dramatically reduce the number of drop boxes. For example, in a majority-minority district on the outskirts of Atlanta, from 33 to 9. The most outrageous part, there is no basis for any of this. In 2020, Georgia held a completely full and fair, safe and secure election. The votes were counted and recounted twice by hand, and the totals were the same every time. But the results were unacceptable to those in power, so rather than trying to change minds, they're changing the rules. And not only in Georgia, frighteningly, in many other states too. There's an urgent need to pass federal legislation to restore and protect voting rights. The For the People Act, which has passed the House of Representatives, would do that, but the bill faces a filibuster in the Senate. Overcoming the filibuster threat and passing voter protection legislation is critical. The future of democracy, or not, hangs in the balance. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1975. That was the day union representatives at Bunker Hill Mining Company in Kellogg, Idaho, were notified of a policy change. The lead and zinc producer had decided to exclude fertile women from working in lead-exposed environments. Women workers had to provide a doctor's note stating they were infertile, postmenopausal, or had been sterilized. Otherwise, they would be transferred to safer departments at a substantial loss in pay. 29 women took the transfer, while at least 3 opted for sterilization. During World War II, companies like Bunker Hill promised millions of women workers that they would eliminate hazards through engineering controls. In the 1970s, a new wave of women gained work in several industries that used occupational safety language to implement exclusionary policies like the one at Bunker Hill. These took the form of outright bans on hiring of women, either altogether or in many departments considered too toxic for women of childbearing years. It meant the real loss of well over 100,000 potential industrial jobs for women. Employers could have provided actual protection through better medical coverage and benefits, installation of engineering controls, or protections to include men's reproductive health. Instead, these policies served to roll back economic and civil rights of women workers, regardless of whether they were mothers or ever planned to be. The women appealed to their union, state and federal commissions, and OSHA, but faced an uphill battle. OSHA initially fined Bunker Hill for outstanding violations and its sterilization policy, but dropped the case once Ronald Reagan took office. The women eventually won wage equivalency in their new jobs, but women working in heavy industry would continue to battle such policies for more than a decade.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Expecting to be around 70 to 73 degrees today. I consider that to be not so bad, especially since we have a moratorium on burning trash. Thankfully. Well, I was wondering when it was going to happen, if ever, but they do that here. And now if anybody is burning their trash, they are scofflaws and should be turned in accordingly. So let's do it. Looks like we will have, what will we have? Sunny conditions throughout the most of the day with winds out of the north-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the low 40s, winds out of the north at 5 to 10, and then sunny tomorrow with highs in the mid-70s. Winds will be light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have now spiked again. This time, we are now at 9,709. And that is a marked increase in infections. Our deceased have remained at 126 for several days, so I guess there's some good to be brought out of it. Grass pollen is rated as moderate. It was just none yesterday, but we were all sneezing. And now it's going to be moderate? Oh, God. When it was none, we were sneezing. Anyway, grass pollen's moderate today here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region, though, is good at 33 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is high at a season high of 7 so far. Wow. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.08 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity has dropped to 60%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. And that's called the Weather Underground, just so you know. London is 52 degrees and sunny. Paris is 52 and sunny. Rome is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Kyiv, are we still calling it Kyiv? Or are you going to call it Kiev? We'll call it Kyiv. Well, Kyiv is right now 60 degrees and fair. Kabul is 56 with thunderstorms. Hong Kong is 71 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 48 with heavy rain. Sydney, Australia is 71 and clear. San Francisco, California is 47 degrees and sunny. And New York, is a bright, spring-like 62 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Sean Gambrell of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Iran will begin enriching uranium up to 60% purity after an attack on its Natanz nuclear facility, a negotiator said yesterday, Tuesday, pushing its program to higher levels than ever before, though still remaining far short of weapons grade. The announcement marks a significant escalation after the sabotage that damaged centrifuges suspected of having been carried out by Israel and could inspire a further response from Israel amid a long-running shadow war between the nations. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed never to allow Tehran to obtain a nuclear weapon, and his country has twice preemptively bombed Mid-East nations to stop their atomic programs. Already earlier in the day, Iran's former minister had warned that the weekend assault at Natanz could hurt ongoing negotiations over its tattered atomic deal with world powers. Those talks are aimed at finding a way for the U.S. to re-enter the agreement, the goal of which is to limit Iran's uranium enrichment in exchange for relief on sanctions. So, in other words, the Israeli attack on the facility was a convenience?
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Edith M. Lederer of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Russia tried for the first time yesterday, Tuesday, to prevent Kosovo's representative from speaking at the UN Security Council with the country's flag in the background, saying the majority of council members don't recognize its independence from Serbia. The request to ban the flag by Russia's deputy UN ambassador at the start of a scheduled open council meeting on Kosovo led to a 45-minute suspension of the virtual meeting while the council's 15 members discussed the issue in private. Dmitry Polyansky, the deputy UN ambassador, said 8 of the 15 members of the Security Council do not recognize Kosovo as a country, and therefore the flag should not appear behind Kosovo's foreign minister, Danica Grvala. He said Russia did not object to her speaking, though. Well, the United Kingdom's legal counsel retorted that Security Council video meetings are not formal meetings. It said Kosovo's flag had appeared behind its representative during the last meeting. After the COVID-19 pandemic halted most in-person meetings at UN headquarters, Russia insisted that any meeting not held in the Security Council chamber, including all those held virtually, would be considered informal. When the meeting finally resumed, the Council's current president said the backgrounds of virtual meetings should not disrupt Council sessions, and the flag could stay. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio waves on and flies on and broadcasts on. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio. Oh, we're going to meet up tomorrow. I forgot. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.